Look, there's a big energy meeting taking place in London. World leaders gathering to talk about energy and all sorts of stuff. But one of the things which Ed Miliband is going to raise, apparently over here, is the idea of having different bills depending on where you live, a postcode lottery sort of thing with bills, depending on demand. And that could very possibly mean electricity would be more expensive down south and potentially cheaper up north, and certainly cheaper in Scotland, it would seem. Is it a good idea or not? Let's head to Westminster. We can talk to the Shadow Financial Secretary, Gareth Davies. Good morning to you. I've got to ask, what do you make of this?
Morning.
Good morning. Well, I'm just hearing of this. I mean, we'll wait to see the detail, but I think it would be another example of how families are going to be paying more for their energy bills at a time when they're already increasing and they were promised that they would go down. So while we'll look at the detail, I think it's important that we step back, have a proper policy and agenda and plan for how we want to rebalance our energy supplies and not be dependent on foreign sources so that families aren't paying more and are being disproportionately burdened.
Now, Gareth, Rachel Reeves was in Washington. She's been trying to secure some sort of trade deal. How do you think that she has fared so far? Because she seems to be continually blaming Donald Trump and tariffs for the state, or for part of the state of the UK economy. Is she fair in doing that?
Well, let me take that in two parts. First of all, I'm a conservative, I'm free trade. I want to see lower tariffs because they're a tax on consumers. And so it is important that this government act with urgency to secure a free trade agreement for the thousands of people who are going to be impacted by the tariffs in this country. I mean, it is positive, at least, that as a result of leaving the European Union, we are in a lower tariff band than they are in Europe. But that free trade agreement is what will ultimately secure our future and help provide that security for jobs across the country. But in terms of the economy, look, when you run a G7 economy, there are global factors all the time. What you don't do is overexpose your economy to those global factors. And as we've seen with Rachel Reeves and what the IMF have said this week, it is the domestic choices of this Chancellor that have exposed us. It's the 40 billion tax raid. It's the debt that is increasing more than anybody expected. Those are the decisions that I think we have to hold the Chancellor to account on, which have overexposed us to global factors.
It's interesting, though, because, I mean, whereas it's a perfectly valid point, what you're not doing is sort of laying into the fact the Chancellor's not got us a free trade deal yet, even though you'd like to see one. Is that partly because your leader, Kemi Badenoch, has already said you can't do a deal that would involve us having to change our legislation when it comes to things like chlorinated chicken, when it comes to hormone beef being allowed into the UK? I mean, she's already... If she was negotiating this, we wouldn't have got anywhere yet.
Well, I think this is a delayed process. I think Labour could have acted much quicker. If you remember back on, in terms of Donald Trump's first term, we did make great progress in negotiating close to a free trade agreement with Donald Trump, but then he lost the election to Joe Biden, and Joe Biden made it clear it wasn't a priority for him. So they could have taken that up immediately with Donald Trump to make sure that we're not in this position today. So I don't accept that. I think Kemi would have acted much quicker. We're now in a situation where this is a delayed free trade agreement, and it's British families and the jobs that could be at risk as a result of that. But it is positive, at least, that Rachel Reeves is in Washington this week, and we'd urge her to make progress with Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, and Keir Starmer with the President of the United States. This is going to be absolutely critical for our economy, as I was talking about.
I'm going to ask you about the Labour Party focusing on a youth mobility scheme. Where do the Conservative Party sit on that?
Well, we want less migration, not more migration, and we know that Labour are cozying up to the European Union. And we know that when Labour negotiate, Britain loses. Just look at the Chagos deal, just look at the union deals that they secured and the fact that strikes are still going on in Birmingham. So I don't have much confidence in this Labour government to deliver for the British people. But as I said, you know, we've got a problem with migration, and we were partly responsible for that, as we've said before. But what would not help is a youth mobility scheme.
I mean, the argument is, it's good for the economy. I mean, and if it is limited to a certain a certain group of people for a certain amount of time, perhaps that's worth overlooking, is it?
Well, we want the right people to come to this country who can contribute to our economy and our society. That's a pretty clear position that we've got. We don't believe that renegotiating with the European Union about an element of free movement, no matter who that's for, is the right approach, as I've said.
OK. Gareth Davies, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. He's the Shadow Financial Secretary.
It's. I have to say, I do find it very odd that this idea of free movement for a group of people is sort of being discussed again. I thought that was all put to bed. I thought that was the whole point of the whole Brexit debate.
Well, yeah, I think they should, and they're just it's a creep back into the EU. Really, that's what they're trying to do by just little nuggets of it and just putting it all back in. I think we need to be very careful with that, especially when we have a problem with immigration, and also I think the Home Office aren't very good at dealing with any of it. So this will be another job for them to do that they'll also do badly.
Yeah, well, possibly. Let us know what you think. GBnews.com/yoursay. Let's talk to journalist and broadcaster Christo Foufas. Who's here.
Well, I have been known to Foufas.
I bet you have.
Now and then.
I bet you have. Christo, I mean, can we start looking at these electricity prices?
Yeah.
What do you make of it all?
I think it's a bad idea. I think that you need to have a level playing field when it comes to energy bills across the United Kingdom. I think that the industries that are saying that this is going to lead to certain areas in the UK not getting investment, especially the areas that require renewables, which is supposed to be the whole strategy of this government, I think that they have a really fair point. If the areas that have the highest demand need renewables, well, those are the areas where the energy is going to be most expensive. If you don't have if you have this dynamic pricing, it's like tickets for Oasis, isn't it? So you are not going to encourage those industries to invest in those places, which is where you need the renewables. It doesn't make any sense.
But some people would argue that actually having regional power centres, you have more control of the actual price of the energy, which is one of the problems that we have at the moment, that it's over one massive area, the entire country, and therefore that way regional areas don't have an ability to use what they have in their area to price their own structures.
I think the fair point about the regional areas is the fact that we obviously have areas where there is they don't have the demand, so therefore they have to pay the providers of renewables to not have to.
So wind farms and
all that stuff. I mean, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and there needs to be more joined up thinking about that. But why is it fairer that someone in an area of high demand has to pay more for their electricity? Why is that fair?
Well, I don't think it's fair, but I look at this, that's the law of supply and demand. I don't agree with this at all, but I can see what they're trying to do. But won't it end up being another administrative nightmare?
But also, whether you like it or not, whether one likes it or not, there are going to be poorer people in the areas with higher demand. Big cities have a larger population of poorer people, and it's going to be the bigger cities that have this higher demand. So you're going to end up with the very people that Labour claim they want to help, which is the poorest in society, paying more.
Once again.
And it doesn't make any sense.
Can we talk about free trade deals, or the possibility of one, with Rachel Reeves in Washington? What is the deal here? Because apparently we've already sort of put on the table that we would look at the digital services tax, which is a big issue for the states. So that's a big concession to Trump. What we're not looking at is things like the good old chlorinated chicken or the beef issue. Should we be looking at that? Should we be putting that on the table? Because it doesn't look like Labour wants to. The Conservatives wouldn't. So maybe we need to stick to our guns on that. I
do think we need to stick to our guns on that, because I don't want us to have lower food standards. Who wants to? I mean, I'm sick of hearing about chlorinated chicken. That's all I never hear about. But I think that we do need to have some red lines. I do think that we need to put our foot down when it comes to these sorts of things. Now, do we need a deal?
Do you know what chlorinated chicken is? It's just chicken washed in chlorine, obviously, because it's not being treated as well, but it'll be a cheaper price. You can choose. What's wrong with having? Do you eat salad from the bags? Salad bags?
Well, I wash it thoroughly before I do so.
It's chlorinated. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I always wash. Do you not wash your salad from a bag?
It's pre-washed.
I
no.
always wash
I
it.
don't trust the pre-washing.
Yeah, but then can't you do the same with your chlorinated chicken? It's just, look, we have lots of things chlorinated, including water. So I just think, for goodness sake,
Well, I'm sorry.
you've got a choice.
Okay, well, I won't claim to be the world's expert on chlorinated chicken. I mean, that is something I will, fess up to right now. But I can't see how putting chlorine onto chicken is something that can be considered a good thing.
Well, it's just about cleaning it, isn't it? Because sometimes it's in areas where there's lots of bacteria.
Would you eat lots of chlorinated
No, because
chicken?
I've got choice. It's somebody who doesn't really care about that.
Meat is something that I think that we should be actually paying a bit more for anyway. I think
Yes.
we all eat a bit less and have better cared for meat, to be honest. And so if this is going to flood the market with cheap chlorinated meat, I don't think that's a good thing, especially for the poorest in Britain.
Well, it's not good for our farmers, actually.
No, I don't agree with that.
I don't
Sorry.
know, but I don't think so. I think that people have choice, and I don't think there should be a big sticking point over any trade deal. We have our standards. If we have a set standard and you're allowed to chlorinate things like salad and things like that, you can do it with chicken.
Maybe we
but
should
I've
be
got
looking
choice.
at less chlorine in salads rather than putting more chlorine into things like chicken. Why don't we have a bit less chlorine in salads?
Like, my choice is to spend a little bit more, buy British, and do it that way. That's what my choice is.
Well, then why are we bringing something into the market that is not going to help British farmers? If your choice is to buy British because it's good for Britain and good for you, why would you then want to bring in something as part of a trade deal that actually isn't good for Britain?
I don't know whether it isn't or it isn't. I think it's just a free trade.
There we must leave it. Good to see you, Christo. Thank you very much indeed.